In just 42 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors completely destroyed a talk show host on live television, exposing his arrogance and disrespect in a way that left the entire studio audience gasping. What started as a simple conversation about faith and values turned into an absolute meltdown, with insults flying, voices raised, and ultimately, a legendary actor walking off the set after refusing to tolerate being mocked and belittled. This is the story of how Denzel Washington shut down Bill Maher so hard that the host was left speechless, scrambling, and looking like a complete fool in front of millions. Before we get into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments when celebrities finally snap back at the industry's biggest egos. Last night, on Real Time with Bill Maher, what should have been a respectful conversation between two intelligent men turned into one of the most uncomfortable and heated exchanges in late-night television history. Denzel Washington, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful responses, was invited onto the show to discuss his latest film and his perspectives on modern American culture. But Bill Maher had other plans, and those plans involved pushing buttons that should never have been pushed. The show started normally enough. Denzel walked out to massive applause from the studio audience. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, looking distinguished as always, and he shook Maher's hand before sitting down. The first few minutes covered the usual territory: Denzel's new movie, his preparation for roles, and some light banter about his long career in Hollywood. The audience was engaged, laughing at appropriate moments, and everything seemed fine. But anyone who knows Bill Maher knows that he can't resist stirring the pot, especially when it comes to topics like religion and traditional values. About 10 minutes into the conversation, Maher shifted gears. He leaned back in his chair with that smirk he's famous for, the one that signals he's about to say something controversial just for the sake of it. He looked at Denzel and said, "So, you've been pretty open about your faith over the years. You go to church, you talk about God, all that stuff. In 2025, don't you think that's a bit outdated? I mean, we've got science, we've got reason, we've got evidence-based thinking. Why do smart people still cling to these ancient superstitions?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room change instantly. Denzel's expression shifted slightly. His jaw tightened just a bit, but he maintained his composure. He nodded slowly and said, "Well, Bill, I respect your perspective, but faith isn't about being outdated or modern. It's about something deeper than trends or what's popular in any given year. It's about having something that grounds you, that gives you purpose beyond yourself." Maher interrupted him, waving his hand dismissively. "But come on, Denzel. You're an educated man. You've read books. You understand how the world works. You really believe there's some guy in the sky watching everything you do? Keeping score? That sounds like something we tell children to make them behave." Denzel's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a breath and responded, "First of all, Bill, that's a pretty simplistic way to describe faith. Nobody I know thinks of God as some guy in the sky. That's a straw man argument, and you know it. Second, my faith has nothing to do with fear or control. It's about love, community, and trying to be a better person. It's helped me through tough times, and it's taught me humility." Maher laughed, actually laughed, right in Denzel's face. "Humility? That's rich. So you need an invisible deity to teach you how to be humble?" "I learned humility from experience, from failing, from other people. I didn't need a church or a Bible for that." The audience was dead silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Denzel sat up straighter, and his voice took on a firmer edge. "Good for you, Bill. I'm glad you found your path. But you don't get to sit there and mock mine. You invited me here for a conversation, not to be ridiculed for my beliefs. There's a difference between challenging someone's ideas and being disrespectful, and you just crossed that line." Maher rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go. I can't ask tough questions without someone getting offended. This is exactly what's wrong with society today. Everyone's so sensitive. I thought you were tougher than this, Denzel. I thought you could handle a little intellectual sparring." That's when you could see Denzel's patience starting to wear thin. His voice remained controlled, but there was steel in it now. "Intellectual sparring? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like arrogance disguised as intellectualism. You're not asking questions, Bill. You're performing. You're trying to get a reaction so you can feel superior. And honestly, It's beneath both of us. Maher's smirk faded slightly. He clearly wasn't expecting Denzel to push back this hard. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. I'm arrogant? I'm just asking why intelligent people believe in fairy tales. That's a legitimate question. If you can't answer it without getting defensive, maybe that says something about the weakness of your position. Denzel leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. You want to know what's weak, Bill? Sitting in your privileged position, on your television show, mocking millions of people who find meaning and strength in their faith. You act like you're some brave truth-teller, but really, you're just punching down at people's deeply held beliefs for entertainment. That's not brave. That's cheap. And it's damn disrespectful. The audience gasped. Some people started clapping, but Maher held up his hand to quiet them. His face was getting red now, and you could tell his ego was bruised. Cheap? You think I'm being cheap? I've built a career on asking the questions that make people uncomfortable. I don't apologize for that. And if your faith is so strong, why can't it withstand a few hard questions? Sounds pretty fragile to me. Denzel shook his head slowly, a look of disappointment crossing his face. You're not listening, Bill. I've answered your questions. I've explained my perspective. But you're not interested in understanding. You're interested in winning. You're interested in making me look foolish, so you can pat yourself on the back. Well, I'm not playing that game, Maher scoffed. So what? You're just going to shut down because I challenged you. That's very mature, Denzel, very grown-up. The tension was unbearable now. Denzel's hands were gripping the armrests of his chair, and his voice dropped to a lower, more dangerous tone. I'm not shutting down, Bill. I'm calling you out. You talk about reason and evidence, but you can't even have a respectful conversation with someone who sees the world differently than you do. You claim to value open-mindedness, but you're one of the most closed-minded people I've ever met. You surround yourself with people who agree with you, and when someone pushes back, you resort to insults and condescension. Maher's face was fully flushed now. He pointed at Denzel, his voice rising. That is complete bullshit. I have people on this show all the time who disagree with me. I debate them, we go back and forth, and it's fine. The difference is, they don't act like victims when I press them on their beliefs. You're sitting here acting like I've attacked you personally, when all I did was question your religion. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. That was the breaking point. Denzel stood up suddenly, and the microphone attached to his lapel made a sharp feedback noise. The entire audience collectively held their breath. Denzel looked down at Maher with an expression of pure disgust. You know what, Bill? You're right about one thing. I shouldn't have done this interview. I should have known better than to expect a genuine conversation with you. You don't respect people. You don't respect beliefs that differ from your own. You don't even respect your own audience enough to have an honest dialogue, instead of this performance art nonsense. Maher stood up too, trying to regain control of the situation. Oh, so you're just going to leave? You're going to storm off like a child throwing a tantrum? That's really showing me, Denzel. Real, powerful statement you're making there. Denzel started removing the microphone from his jacket, his movements deliberate and calm, despite the fury in his eyes. I'm not throwing a tantrum, Bill. I'm making a choice. I'm choosing not to sit here and be disrespected. I'm choosing not to participate in your little game where you get to mock people's values for laughs. You can call it whatever you want, but I call it having self-respect. Something you clearly know nothing about. The audience was going crazy now. Some people booing, some people cheering, everyone on their feet. Maher's producers were frantically signaling from off-camera, trying to figure out how to handle this disaster. Maher himself looked completely flustered, which was rare for him. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out forced and awkward. Wow, okay. So this is how Denzel Washington handles criticism. Good to know. Really showing that Christian forgiveness and turning the other cheek, huh? Denzel stopped in his tracks. He turned back to face Maher, and the look on his face made everyone go silent again. You want to talk about Christianity now? Fine. Let's talk about it. Jesus taught us to love our neighbors, to show compassion, to treat people with dignity and respect. He also taught us to stand up against hypocrisy and self-righteousness. So yeah, I'm turning the other cheek by walking away from this toxic conversation instead of saying what I really want to say to you. But make no mistake, Bill, this isn't weakness. This is strength. It takes strength to walk away from someone who's trying to drag you down to their level. Maher threw his hands up in exasperation. Oh my God, you are so full of yourself right now. Listen to you. You sound like you're auditioning for a role as a prophet or something. Get over yourself, Denzel. You're an actor, not a saint. And you're definitely not better than anyone else just because you go to church on Sundays. Denzel's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried across the entire studio. I never said I was better than anyone, Bill. That's your game, not mine. You're the one who sits up here every week judging people, telling them how they should think, how they should live, what they should believe. You're the one who acts like your opinion is the only one that matters. I came here to have a conversation, but you can't have a conversation with someone who only hears the sound of his own voice. Maher was visibly angry now, his face contorted. You know what? Fine, leave. Walk off my show. I don't need you here anyway. I've had plenty of guests who are way more interesting and way less uptight than you. Go back to your bubble where everyone tells you how great and righteous you are. But don't act like you're taking some moral stand. You're just running away because you can't defend your outdated beliefs. Denzel finished removing his microphone and placed it carefully on the chair. He buttoned his suit jacket and looked directly at Maher one last time. I'm not running away from anything, Bill. I'm walking away from you. There's a difference. And as for my beliefs being outdated, I'd rather have faith in something greater than myself than spend my life tearing other people down to feel smart. You know what's really outdated? Your act. This whole angry atheist shtick was tired 10 years ago. Now it's just sad. The audience erupted. Half of them were on their feet applauding. The other half were booing and shouting. It was complete chaos. Maher tried to shout over the noise. Get out then, go. Nobody's stopping you. And don't come crying back when you want to promote your next movie because you're not welcome here. Denzel started walking toward the exit at the side of the stage. He moved with complete dignity, not rushing, not looking back. His posture was straight, his head held high. As he reached the edge of the stage, one of the producers tried to stop him, probably to smooth things over or get him to stay. But Denzel gently but firmly moved past him. The camera operators were scrambling, not sure whether to follow him or stay on Maher. Maher was still shouting from behind his desk, trying desperately to maintain control of his show. This is unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, Denzel Washington, everyone. Can't handle a simple conversation about religion without having a meltdown. This is what happens when you live in Hollywood too long. You forget that not everyone is going to kiss your ass and tell you how wonderful you are. But the audience wasn't really listening to Maher anymore. Most of them were watching Denzel disappear through the exit, and many of them were still applauding him. Some people were even standing and shouting words of support. The energy in the room had completely shifted away from Maher, and you could see on his face that he knew he'd lost control of the situation. He'd lost the audience. He'd lost the moment. As Denzel walked through the backstage area, crew members and staff stood aside, some of them looking shocked, others looking impressed. One of the younger production assistants even started a slow clap that a few other people joined. Denzel didn't acknowledge any of it. He just kept walking with that same calm, purposeful stride, heading toward the exit door that led out of the studio. Back on stage, Maher was trying to regain his composure and move on with the show. He shuffled some papers on his desk and attempted a joke. Well, that was intense. I guess some people really can't separate their egos from their imaginary friends. We'll be right back after this break, hopefully with a guest who can handle an adult conversation. But the damage was done. The audience was still buzzing, talking among themselves, and the energy in the studio was all wrong. Maher looked smaller somehow, less confident, less in control. He'd invited one of the most respected actors in Hollywood onto his show, mocked his beliefs, insulted his intelligence, and pushed him to the point where walking off was the only dignified option. And in doing so, he'd shown everyone watching exactly who he really was. Not a brave truth-teller or an intellectual provocateur, but just another talk show host more interested in cheap shots than real dialogue. Meanwhile, Denzel reached the final door leading out of the building. He pushed it open, and the cool night air hit his face. A few photographers who'd been waiting outside started snapping pictures, shouting questions at him. But Denzel didn't respond. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken louder than any statement ever could. He'd stood up for himself, refused to be disrespected, and walked away from a toxic situation with his dignity intact. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Denzel Washington disappeared into the night, leaving Bill Maher and his studio audience to deal with the mess that had just unfolded. Inside, Maher was trying to continue his show, but everyone could see he was rattled. His jokes weren't landing, his timing was off, and he kept glancing at the empty chair where Denzel had been sitting just moments before. The chair that now stood as a physical reminder of his failure to show basic respect to a guest, and the price he'd paid for that arrogance. This confrontation wasn't just about religion or faith or atheism. It was about respect, or the lack of it. It was about what happens when ego and arrogance override basic human decency. Bill Maher had spent years building a reputation as someone who asks tough questions and doesn't back down. But last night, he learned a hard lesson. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being a bully. There's a difference between challenging ideas and mocking people. And there's a difference between having confidence in your beliefs and having so much arrogance that you can't even see when you've crossed the line. Denzel Washington didn't need to scream, didn't need to curse Maher out, didn't need to throw things or make threats. He simply stood up, spoke his truth, and walked away. And somehow, that was more powerful than anything else he could have done. He showed millions of viewers that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's circus. Sometimes the most powerful statement is knowing when to leave. The studio audience, the crew, and everyone watching at home witnessed something rare on live television, a moment of genuine human emotion breaking through the carefully scripted world of late-night talk shows. They saw someone refuse to be a prop in another person's performance. They saw dignity in action. They saw what it looks like when someone chooses self-respect over ratings, authenticity over entertainment, and truth over tolerance of disrespect. As news of the confrontation spread within the studio and among the live audience, people couldn't stop talking about it. During the commercial break, audience members were on their phones, texting their friends and family about what they'd just witnessed. The people sitting in those seats had expected a typical episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. Some political jokes, maybe a heated debate about current events, and a celebrity guest promoting their latest project. What they got instead was a masterclass in standing up for yourself and a stark reminder that even Hollywood legends have their breaking point. When the show came back from commercial, Maher tried to move forward with his panel segment, but the mood was different. His other guests, who'd been watching the confrontation from backstage, seemed uncomfortable. Their answers were shorter than usual, their laughter more forced. They'd all seen what happened when you got on Maher's bad side, or more accurately, what happened when Maher pushed someone too far. The usual free-flowing conversation felt stilted and awkward. Everyone was still thinking about Denzel's empty chair and the words that had been exchanged. Maher made a few more comments about the incident throughout the rest of the show, trying to spin it as Denzel being unable to handle criticism, but it rang hollow. The audience wasn't buying it. You could hear it in their muted response to his jokes about the situation. They'd been there. They'd seen it with their own eyes. They knew who'd been out of line, and it wasn't Denzel Washington. Outside the studio, Denzel got into a waiting car without saying a word to the paparazzi or the small crowd that had gathered when word got out about what happened. His face was calm, almost serene, showing no signs of regret or second-guessing his decision. He'd done what he needed to do, said what he needed to say, and now he was moving on. That's the mark of someone who's truly comfortable with their choices, someone who doesn't need external validation to know they did the right thing. The confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish, but it felt like an eternity to everyone watching. 15 minutes that showcased everything wrong with the current state of political and cultural discourse. 15 minutes that demonstrated how easily a conversation can devolve when one person is more interested in being right than being respectful. 15 minutes that reminded us all that celebrities, for all their fame and fortune, are still human beings who deserve to be treated with basic dignity and courtesy. Bill Maher had always prided himself on being provocative, on pushing boundaries, on saying things that others were afraid to say. But there's a fine line between being provocative and being offensive, between challenging someone and attacking them, between asking difficult questions and mocking someone's core values. Last night, Maher didn't just cross that line, he obliterated it. And Denzel Washington made him pay the price for that transgression in the most public way possible. What made the confrontation even more powerful was Denzel's restraint throughout most of it. He didn't raise his voice until the very end. He didn't throw insults. He didn't make it personal until Maher had already made it personal multiple times over. Denzel gave Maher chance after chance to back off, to show some respect, to have a genuine conversation. But Maher couldn't help himself. He kept pushing, kept mocking, kept trying to score points with his audience at Denzel's expense. And eventually, Denzel had had enough. The irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. Bill Maher, who constantly complains about cancel culture and political correctness and people being too sensitive, couldn't handle being called out for his disrespect. He immediately went on the defensive, attacked Denzel's character, and tried to paint himself as the victim. It was a stunning display of hypocrisy that many people watching immediately picked up on. The man who dishes it out constantly showed that he absolutely cannot take it when someone pushes back with equal force. As Denzel's car pulled away from the studio, he finally allowed himself a small smile. Not a smug smile or a satisfied smile, but the smile of someone who knows they stood up for themselves when it mattered. He'd gone into that interview with good intentions, ready to have a thoughtful conversation about his work and his life. But when pushed into a corner, when disrespected and mocked, he didn't shrink away. He didn't play nice for the cameras. He did what any self-respecting person should do. He set a boundary and enforced it. Back in the studio, as the show wrapped up and the final credits rolled, Bill Maher sat at his desk looking deflated. The swagger and confidence he usually exuded was gone. He'd been exposed not by some elaborate plan or coordinated attack, but simply by his own actions and someone else's willingness to call him out on his bullshit. The crew started breaking down the set, and you could hear them whispering to each other about what had happened. Some were laughing in disbelief, others were shaking their heads, but everyone agreed on one thing. This was going to be the most talked about episode of the show in years, but not for the reasons Maher would want. The confrontation between Denzel Washington and Bill Maher will be remembered as one of those rare television moments where the mask slipped, where the careful production and polished presentation broke down, and we saw something real. We saw pride, we saw disrespect, we saw patience wearing thin, and ultimately, we saw someone choose their dignity over everything else. In a world where so many people will tolerate anything for fame, for exposure, for publicity, Denzel showed that some things are more important than all of that: self-respect, personal values, the refusal to be diminished by someone else's need to feel superior. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out, many of them were still talking about what they'd witnessed. Some were Team Denzel, praising him for standing up to Maher's arrogance. A few were Team Maher, arguing that Denzel had overreacted to simple questions. But most people fell somewhere in the middle, recognizing that while both men could have handled things differently, it was Maher who had set the tone by choosing mockery over respect, and Denzel who had responded by choosing self-preservation over playing along with someone else's game. The empty chair where Denzel had sat remained on stage for several minutes after the show ended, a silent testament to what had transpired. Crew members walked past it, glancing at it, probably replaying the confrontation in their minds. That chair, which had hosted countless celebrities over the years, had never been abandoned quite like this. Usually, guests stayed through the entire show, no matter how uncomfortable things got, because that's what you do on television. You smile, you laugh, you play the game. But Denzel Washington had decided he was done playing games, done being polite in the face of disrespect, done pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. This wasn't just another celebrity feud or manufactured drama for ratings. This was a genuine moment of conflict between two very different worldviews, two very different approaches to communication and respect. Bill Maher represents a certain type of modern intellectualism that often mistakes cynicism for wisdom and mockery for insight. Denzel Washington represents something that's becoming increasingly rare. Someone who holds firm to their values without needing to tear down others. Someone who can be questioned without feeling threatened, but who also knows when they're being disrespected rather than challenged. The confrontation raised important questions about the nature of discourse in our society. When does questioning become attacking? When does skepticism become mockery? When is it appropriate to walk away from a conversation that's no longer productive? Denzel provided answers to all of these questions through his actions last night. He showed that there's a time for patience and a time for setting boundaries. There's a time for dialogue and a time for saying, enough is enough. What made this confrontation so compelling wasn't just the drama or the raised voices or the shocking exit. It was the underlying truth that everyone watching could recognize. We've all been in situations where someone disrespects us under the guise of just asking questions or having a conversation. We've all dealt with people like Bill Maher, who think that being provocative gives them license to be rude. And many of us have wished we had the courage to do exactly what Denzel did: stand up, speak our truth, and walk away with our heads held high. The door that Denzel walked through to leave the studio now stands as a symbol of personal agency in the face of public pressure. In an industry where people are expected to tolerate almost anything for publicity, where staying in your seat and taking abuse is seen as professional, Denzel chose a different path. He chose authenticity over performance, integrity over optics, and in doing so, he gave everyone watching permission to do the same in their own lives, to recognize when they're being disrespected, and to have the courage to remove themselves from toxic situations. Bill Maher will probably continue his show as if nothing major happened. He'll make jokes about it, spin it in his favor, and move on to the next controversy. That's what people like him do. But he'll also carry the knowledge that he pushed one of Hollywood's most respected figures too far, that he let his ego override his judgment, and that in the process, he revealed something about himself that can't be taken back. He showed millions of viewers that beneath the intellectual posturing and the claims of open-mindedness, he's just as close-minded and disrespectful as the people he regularly criticizes. And Denzel Washington walked out of that studio into the night, leaving behind the chaos and the shouting and the disrespect, proving once again why he's not just a great actor, but a man of principle who refuses to compromise his values for anyone or anything, not even for one of the biggest talk shows on television.